SRS is the intellectual equivalent of a video game save point, written by Khatzumoto, posted in August of 2010. Over the years, some amazing comments have been left here at AJATT, but they get lost in the fog of posts quite easily. All-Star Comments is a segment where I share the best of the best. Today's comment is from a heartbreaker who goes by the moniker SRS Addict. The original post was about using the SRS to remember the best parts of the best examples of personal development literature. Anyway, enjoy. Quote, SRS Addict said on November 24th, 2009. This is a long comment. Here it goes. I find this post very interesting. Here's why. About 3.5 years ago, I began to use the SRS program SuperMemo, which I will refer to as SM. Since I began using SM, other programs have emerged that specialize in language study, but since I've been using SM for so long and have so much time invested in it, it is far too late to think about jumping ship. No doubt the other SRS programs out there work great, so I don't think I'm knocking them. In the end, use something. It's better than nothing. Anyways, I began to use SM about 3 years ago to retain Japanese vocabulary. Despite living in America, uncommon words that one does not use very often, such as round trip, continued to remain in my memory, and it required very little thought to recall them. This feeling of satisfaction was very addictive, and I began to integrate more and more of my intellectual life with SuperMemo. I can now speak, read, and write Japanese fluently. I passed the JLPT NIKU a couple of years ago without even going to Japan. And the reason that I've progressed this much has little to do with my abilities. I am really quite average, I think. But I believe that it is purely because SuperMemo has helped to augment my abilities and to focus my efforts so that as little time and effort as possible is wasted. At least when that time and effort is being spent on SuperMemo. Here's why. Humans need a variety of food to remain healthy. Similarly, no single specific method will gain you fluency in a language. Language study requires a balance of different methods and inputs. SM seems to have become my intellectual equivalent of a video game save point. While up until that time, I might have seen or read or heard many interesting or useful things, but until I save my intellectual progress, such information only occupies a temporary place in my mind. While SM is not the only thing I use, it is part of my balanced diet. I began by putting Japanese sentences into SM with the word I wanted to memorize written in English. It was easier than trying to decide the word in Japanese. This created context and usage hints. I would usually enter at least 2 flashcards for each word, like firing multiple bullets to ensure I hit the desired target, thus ensuring that unless I made a big mistake in structuring the material, poor word choice, the algorithms would ensure that I could remember the word in due time. After about a week or two, it would stick very well in my mind. This worked for vocabulary words, so I thought, would this work for idiomatic expressions also? So I began to experiment. And as time went on, when the appropriate time to use such an idiom presented itself, it required as little time as it took to remember a single vocabulary word. Now, it was easy to rack up idioms, as well as 4-character idioms, in my head. Using James Hasig's Remembering the Kanji Volumes 1 and 2, although I went my own way with Book 2, I learned all of the onyomi for the kanji, which made learning most vocabulary words much, much simpler, most being a combination of 2 kanji using the onyomi. In the end, learning Japanese simply came down to shooting fish in a barrel, racking up more and more vocabulary that was easily accessible and would be forever retained using SM. Japanese has now passed on from the I need to study phase to the I speak it fluently phase. If I were playing World of Warcraft, my Japanese character would be at level 80, although I do not play that game, as I want to defend my time from such bandits. I still add Japanese words to SM, but it is like killing low-level monsters at this point, although I would like to eventually take the JLPT EQ, the final boss. But since Japanese is, for all intents and purposes, done, I am moving on to Chinese. Knowing the kanji has helped out a great deal, and the onyomi bears a strong enough resemblance to the actual Chinese reading of the character that it is helpful. But each language poses a different set of problems, and I'm always experimenting with variations of methods to try to make it a step further in my Chinese progress. Like you mentioned, keeping a forward-thinking, open mind about how to do things helps to ensure progress. Once you find something that works, exploit it until it stops working or you find something better. Currently, I'm experimenting with the flashcard format used by the website smart.fm. I'm trying to implement it into SM to see if I learn words better than my preset flashcard format for Chinese. You might want to give that site a try if you haven't already. We soldier on. About a year after I began using SM to learn Japanese, I began to experiment with using SM on non-Japanese desirable knowledge. To learn something forever required such a small investment of time, less than a minute for the next 30 years of retention. Therefore, 1 hour of entertainment consumption time could be converted into self-enrichment through knowledge time. The long-lasting benefits are so obvious that it makes many other tasks and pursuits seem trivial by comparison. but one must find balance in life, and you have to eat some candy every now and then. But rather than simply being a useful study tool, SM has opened a new way of life for me, where tangible knowledge consumption and retention is well within the grasp of everyone, regardless of anything else. All that is required is a small amount of time and motivation. As another commenter mentioned above, the process you describe is very similar to incremental reading, a feature advertised on the SM website. Traditional reading is very much the equivalent of listening to a long speech by someone, and your input is limited: start, stop, or highlight. Incremental reading is basically a process of taking raw electronic reading material, extracting the useful information, and processing for long-term retention. Making something into a flashcard is the end goal of the process. It is the same as digesting food. Take food in, extract nutritious parts, get rid of what you don't need. Since the world has yet to go fully digital when it comes to reading material, it seems that we still must suffer for a while without having buy or borrow as a text document as an option for our local libraries or bookstores. On the bright side, books are very small compared to MP3s, and music is pirated very often. Therefore, the potential to download books that you buy is very possible, although spotty. For example, I purchased Atlas Shrugged, but found that reading it incrementally on SM was more fun than carrying the big book around with me. I was able to find Atlas Shrugged online with little trouble. Now I'm currently reading it through SM. Where traditional reading is more of a lecture, incremental reading is more of an organic dialogue. Granted, the text no longer retains its form, it gets chopped up rather quickly, like clipping out parts of a magazine article that you like. But we want knowledge in our head, not pretty-looking words on paper. This philosophy has made me enjoy reading much, much more. I recommend you read more about incremental reading. It echoes the sentiments expressed here. Also, I don't want to write what has already been written. But another experiment that I started about a year ago, that I believe conclusively works, was to see if semi-knowledge put into Super Memo could create subtle changes in my personality and thought process. You mentioned putting inspirational quotes into Super Memo, and this is pretty much what I did, but I went about it in a different way. Everyone makes decisions based on principles. Someone might see someone else in need. If they are raised a Christian, they might think, do unto others, so they decide to help that person out. Others might operate on a different principle, which would lead to a different action. The question was, could I take those different principles, put them into SM, and just like the idiomatic expressions, when that principle would come into play, would such principles come to mind and give more options when making decisions? I believe that that answer is yes. For example, one could take key phrases from various philosophy or religious books that are deemed useful and beneficial by the user, of course, put them into SM, and over time they would have such views of the world at their disposal. Whether or not they are adopted is up to the user. Therefore, you do not have to adopt the philosophy to understand it and have it at your disposal. For example, I have a number of quotes from Hitler in SM because his twisted mind demonstrates a certain cunning and manipulative evil, which it does good to recognize when seen elsewhere, even in subtle ways. So basically, SM has become a tool in which I program myself. It has grown to encompass my entire life and has become my primary means of retaining information about the world around me. I spend about an hour using SM every day. Right now I have about 33,000 active flashcards in my big flashcard deck. End quote and end article.